Hello, welcome. This was unintended, but we had a few technical hitches just before we started, which is probably not uncommon for some people. But for me, obviously, being my first for a while doing webinars, I thought I'd tell you how I was feeling because I think it's really important given that this is about neuroscience. And later on, we talk about hormones and feelings as well and chemicals, because obviously the neuroscience element. For me personally, I feel a bit more nervous than I would have done. Ordinarily, I'm a very confident person and I'm still confident, but you can perhaps hear my voice is a little bit less than calm as it would be. But incidentally, it's quite useful because this whole webinar really is about high performance, being able to manage your stress levels and resilience and return to a level of getting back on with business and still getting the job done and as well as you possibly can. So thank you for joining us, whoever's out there. I don't actually know because this is new technology to me, which is also a little bit unnerving. But I know there was quite a lot of you that registered, and I'm really grateful that you've arrived if you're there. We can't even get you to give me a wave. It's not like the Zoom calls of COVID, but thank you for joining. We're going to go through really just hopefully some education pieces and just some explanation and some bit of storytelling really on some of the experiences we've witnessed and seen. As a business, we've been going for 9 years, and this is not a sales pitch, although obviously we are a business, so money and clients are always useful. But it really is about our motivation is to do what we can to help organisations have positive experiences with their clients, build collaborative cultures. And we believe everyone, if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is really about helping people reach their potential. And if you're able to be high performing as an individual, you'll be able to be high performing in your organisation as well. So we're going to go full screen now, and hopefully you'll be able to hear what I'm saying. And as I say, as I'm going through it, really, I think your senses will be more focused on the slides and what I'm actually saying, as opposed to looking at my movements and background, which I did tidy up before we started. So hopefully that's okay too. But I look forward to any comments at the end. If you do have to rush off and you can't make it, we do have a playbook, which has a lot more detail, especially around the neuroscience. I'm not a neuroscientist, clearly, but there are a lot of principles and insights that we take from the world of neuroscience. So I hope you enjoy it. And again, thanks for joining us. So we're going to really look about what neuroscience is generally. Leadership styles we'll cover. We'll look at some stress management and really what stress is actually, as well as what makes a high performance organisation. I think it's important to say for anyone listening and that might nip off that this isn't about blaming people for doing a bad job, and it's not about saying that anybody intends harm to people when they manage in a certain way. But we do recognise that sometimes lots of people are quite horrified when they find out that perhaps they've been misunderstood in the wrong way itself. So anyway, here we go. So I've told you a little bit about Engage and Prosper, but I suppose our motivation really is from a background of understanding that more productive and happy collaborative cultures actually generally make for high performing organisations, both from a profitable point of view as well as a productivity, but actually they're fun, nicer places to work. And obviously mental health is a big issue right now. It always has been, but more so than ever post-COVID. And we really like to be able to help tailor personalised solutions to people, either by advice or doing work for them, in getting them to recognise perhaps some of the culture that they actually inadvertently have isn't necessarily working for them in the best way. So the brainstem, limbic system and cerebral cortex, really, as I say, the playbook that we have is very detailed and it goes into explaining these a little bit more so that you can use and refer to it and share it across your business or with people that you might want to. But the brainstem really is the reptilian brain, so it's the oldest part of the brain, and it's really responsible for our sort of key unconscious operating systems, if you like, and the very basic elements of it. The limbic system is all connected to the nervous system itself, and the cerebral cortex is really our sort of conscious mind and how we do things on a day-to-day basis, storing our long-term memory, our language, our sight and everything else. There are actually 4 areas of the brain, different lobes. I'm not actually going to go into it, partly because I don't want to say something wrong that actually is going to make me look stupid. And that's just me verbalizing my inner concerns, which often in a workplace you don't get to hear. But I'm very honest and open, so there you go. But a lot of this information is in the playbook, and it does go into an understanding about perhaps, you know, the different way our brain accesses memory, how it manages different rhythms, and also just knowledge, like our vocabulary. And we'll come on to explaining that, there are hormones at play in us every day, all the time, and they're triggered at different amounts. And those triggering will result in either a higher performance or an eroded performance, because we can't focus, we can't concentrate, or we're being distracted by the wrong things. And really, we need to get back to a state of calm so that we can bounce forward. As somebody said to me recently, we don't bounce back, we bounce forward. So really, that's what this is about. And I hope some of the stories that we tell you shortly will give you something to think about yourselves as individuals or managers or environments you work in now. So you're probably familiar, and I imagine you are, with the fight, flight and freeze response. There are others actually, like fawn, and where people don't actually know what to do. But these are generally, it's important to say at this point that cortisol and adrenaline are stress hormones. Now, cortisol is something we actually need in the right amount to have a good body rhythm for sleeping and managing our motivation. So cortisol itself is not a bad thing, but actually in excess over a prolonged period of times, it is. And it's something that really affects our health and our well-being for the long term as well. So it's really something not to be scoffed at or just sort of nodded away to, that yes, we know what cortisol is. The stress hormone. Yeah, actually, it's big news, and it's bad news if you've got it in high doses for a long time. The flight element obviously is, do we choose to stay and fight? And that might in the workplace be a way of actually being more proactive. Some people think it's assertive, some people think it's aggressive. It might be that you take issue with somebody and you retaliate, or you go and sort something out proactively because actually you're not happy with it. That would be a proactive modern day version of having a fight. Clearly, I hope there aren't workplaces across the country where everyone's having a good punch up. That would be quite sad, but I'm sure it happens in some places. The flight element obviously is when actually, the modern version would be, I'm feeling a bit panicky. I don't actually know what to do about this situation, and so I'm going to, metaphorically run away. I'm just going to avoid it. So it might be work on your desk that you think, I just can't do that because I don't have the support or the tools and the knowledge. So I'm just going to leave it right to the end. Again, another phrase is eat the frog. Get the thing out of the work that you don't want to do out of the day done, and then you can actually enjoy the rest of the stuff you've got to do. But often, most of the time, we don't do that. But there's normally a reason why we're not doing that, and that might be because we don't have the skill. It's cognitively too stressful. We don't really know enough about what we're doing, and these are things in the workplace that need to be actively looked at rather than just plans and strategies applied. And the freeze element, well, really, that's a bit of a panic, isn't it? It's, you don't actually know. Are you going to fight? Are you going to go and try and sort this out and have a chat with whoever you need to, HR or your manager or colleagues or other departments? Are you going to just ignore it and run away? Or are you going to literally just do nothing? Neither. You don't actually know what to do. So none of those situations really are what a productive or high-performing workplace is going to be. And I'm sorry about my email. That's the email going off. And if I turn the volume off now, I may actually end up stopping myself being heard. So you're just going to have to put up with that, I'm afraid. But at least it's live and I'm still here. So leadership, that's a big one, isn't it? Leadership, manager, which is it? And there's lots of charts out there between what leadership quality is and, what managers are. Now, a lot of managers become managers because they're good at the job they do, not at necessarily managing. And we all know that. And that's not really their fault, because effectively, to mentor well, you need to know your subject. And if you know your industry and you know the job and the company, you'd be a brilliant mentor if you have the right skills and if you can lead an individual. So there's a lot of debate around what that really is. And leadership really is about getting the best out of people that work for you. So I'm not going to go into big detail here. Again, the playbook goes into the definitions of these in a much better and clear way than I will do justice to this webinar right now. But ultimately, autocratic is very much a case of a controlling element. You do as I say, very much old school type of approach to management. Democratic, clearly, I think in UK we know what democracy is, and it's really a case of looking at what the majority want and agree with. That's normally at a leadership level, though, normally at a management level, and that might not be really what's best for the business. So that's one to consider. The transformational, that's really what everybody wants and what we need, and the modern world needs is open-minded individuals that really are looking about the whole collective of the people that they employ, the work they do and the purpose they have, and really allowing people and not being frightened that it's going to make them look like they don't know what they're doing, or that they're too vulnerable, they'll be taken advantage of. I think it's a very empowering way to look at how you transform as an individual and as a business, and do that openly with your employees. The laissez-faire, clearly that's really a bit of apathetic inertia. Not really, there's no rush, there's no hurry. And I'm not going to pick a culture or anything, because that would be wrong, because that's not actually fair, and stereotypes don't do anyone any good. But I don't know why we've got the French in there anyway. But you understand the point. And then if you look at the low to high on the task emphasis, and then the people emphasis and the high performance, clearly transformational quadrant is where you've got a high focus on people and not about task. The task will take care of themselves. In fact, you'll get so much more innovation and so much more creativity if you're looking at the people first and always, and transformational approach to leading individuals that way. So I talked about cortisol earlier, and I'll mention it again because I don't want people, and I have dealt with managers and leaders before that have said, stress is good, pressure is good, you've got to keep on top of people, otherwise they'll just get lazy, or they'll take the mickey, or whatever it is. And yeah, if you've hired the wrong people, or you've got a terrible culture, or you aren't supporting people to understand it, you've got to ask, there's something wrong in your recruitment process if they're then turning lazy. And I don't think they are lazy, really. I think ultimately the stress curve, if you look at those bands in the middle, the optimum, it's a small window really of optimum. Too much, and that progressively becomes too much. It becomes really tired, and if you can relate to it yourself, think of a job where you felt really tired, or you've just thought, just working too hard, they're not getting anyone in again, I've asked them, I've told them. Nobody manages the actual workload a lot of the time. There's certain roles, there's certain organisations where it's really evident about how the cost and time analysis is really quite clear if you're moving widgets, etc. But actually, how many jobs are really like that? If it's cognitively loaded, you have a busy period in a restaurant, it suddenly goes mad, or in any kind of other industry where it's peaks and troughs. You're not ready necessarily for that capacity or expansion, and therefore the employee takes the stress. And it's being mindful of how much stress that is, because ultimately acute chronic stress will lead to burnout. So it's really looking at the performance and looking at the stress levels and finding a mid-optimum equilibrium where there's enough pressure that it's stressful, not stressful, that it's exciting, that I've got stress now, I've got pressure now doing this, but do I feel like my life depended on it? No, I don't. Do I feel that I don't care whether or not actually you all enjoy it, or you think it was of value to give your time to me today? Yes, absolutely. If I did this every day and all day, I would be bored. And so probably maybe my professional standard might drop a little bit. Maybe I'd get better. I'd hope I get better, actually. So if I do another one, you'll have to let me know. But hopefully that stress curve gives you a bit of an understanding that stress is good, but stress at the right levels, at the right point, and in the right way. So just remember that when you're thinking about your own employees and your own job. If you do need somebody because the work has got too much, too often, for too long, and you need something's suffering, and actually the business owners or the leaders need to know, because it will impact client satisfaction and your ability to gain clients. Time and energy. I really wanted to just put this in here because part of what we do is really focus on how to optimize the use of time and also your own available energy as an individual and as a business. Ultimately, again, the phrases we hear are, well, I've got no time. There's not enough time. There's not enough time in the day. We always hear that phrase. Now, we know every day there's 24 hours. It doesn't change. So we know that sometimes it's slightly brighter and for longer, and different times of the summer and the winter, but it's still 24 hours. And we also know, and this might sound a bit ridiculous, but it's not until recently that I really thought that ultimately at some point we can only ever have 100% of our energy. And it's how we choose to use that energy. We can create more energy if we've got bad lifestyle, if we're not looking after ourselves, we're not getting enough sleep, we're not doing things that reward our soul and have a bit of self-care, then actually our energy levels are going to be lower than they could be. So we can do something about that. But we do want to be at 100% as much as the time as possible. And that really is about using our time properly and in the right way. And that's really about your own rhythms, your own structures, your own processes. So it's a really ridiculous slide to have two little images on there. But I really think if it's one thing you take away from today, is think about your time and how you use your energy in your job and in your life, because we're at work way too long to be unhappy. And it's really important that you enjoy your job and you enjoy the people that you're working with and you're doing something you enjoy. So this whole webinar really is about high performance and resilience, because resilience is what produces high performance. So if you look at this chart again, so a shock could be any event. It might be a loss of a massive client. It might be a change of ownership. It could be in the business. It could be any number of those things on a micro level in a department or in a macro level where it affects the whole business. COVID effectively was a shock. It was a massive shock to a lot of businesses. But what you can see here in this chart, the green line or the teal line, teal's my favourite colour if you haven't worked that out, is the resilient company. The bottom colour, which is kind of red or orange, depending on your eyesight, is a non-resilient company. So a company that really doesn't have that collusion and cohesion in the business, that they all know what they're doing, they're all going for the same thing, they all trust each other, and they do their best every day as much as they can. Now, clearly you can see that the speed of recovery is quicker and faster and higher for a company that's got resilient employees, because you can't be a resilient company if you don't have resilient employees. Otherwise the company, it doesn't act on its own. The company is the mass and the sum of the employees within it and the leaders. Clearly the leaders have an awful lot to be, influence in achieving that. But that's why the aim of looking to improve your relationship with your employees, your culture, the collaboration, understanding how different practices and management styles impact and affect your individual performance as a person, but also as a department, as a team, as a company. It's really important that you take that on board as much as you can. So I said earlier I was going to talk about some stories, and in this part of the webinar, what I'd really like you to do is, just reflect on your own experiences. I've done this myself, and I learn all the time actually about how I might have done things a bit better, how I wish I'd done things differently, and how perhaps different managers treated me at times. And again, it's not about blame. It's more about what we understand is that a lot of individuals don't realise perhaps what their approach is and how it might be impacted by another individual. And I know you have to be yourself, you have to be your true self, but you also have to be considerate and hopefully open-minded and hopefully looking to improve your communication styles and perhaps understand how you're being interpreted. I said to somebody, and I say it regularly, I'm never on the receiving end of me. So I don't actually know what other people really feel and think about interactions with me, because I can't be objective about myself, not truly, because I am me, if that doesn't sound a bit crazy. So if you understand that, you might think you're doing a great job and really giving that individual what they need. And this is what sometimes one-to-ones are all about, is really connecting with people and understanding, what do they need from you? What do they like about the way you interact? What they don't like about the way you interact? It doesn't mean you're going to transform your personality. It just means you're going to be more mindful with each other about how to get along. And isn't that really about, good relations and socializing in a positive way? So as I say, the stories I'm going to go through, they're a blend really of the people that I've met or I've known of or I've worked with. And they're not real single people now, technically, but they're people that I have in mind of where they were in these stories and then where they are now, which we'll come on to in a moment. But I would like you to think about your own experiences and just think about those feelings and how it would make you feel or how you did feel in similar scenarios if you were ever in any. So we've got Ralph. So Ralph is a, generally speaking, a high flyer. He's done particularly well in the job that he's doing. He's very, very capable. We'd call him in the industry of recruitment and talent a hypo. So he's high performance and he's high potential. So he's one that you'd watch if you were in succession planning and you were looking at people for future senior roles or certain hard projects. He would be somebody you would be looking at. But he's done so well for so long, and his boss, she's great. She really, really understands that, we need motivation and incentives and rewards. So she's really taken that on board in previous roles and in the role she's in now. And Ralph has been smashing targets and achieving for a long time. So he's got a reputation to uphold. He's been in the business about a year, but it's really taking a toll on his own mental health. He stresses and worries about his targets all the time. The rewards when they first started were great. They were a brilliant lift. They were like fantastic. I get this money, I get these vouchers, I get these experience. And I am not at all saying that these things aren't good, because they really are. appreciation and recognition is something very true and real to me that I value, and I think everyone should do on a daily basis, sincerely. But too much of them, they sort of normalised really, and they start to become just business as usual. But the stress is still there. Ralph really is, I hate to say it because it's a really strong word, but his mental health is massively declined. He's kind of almost at the point where, suicidal ideation at times has appeared in his head. Thankfully, that's not happened. But he's really struggling because he doesn't believe he can leave the job. That to him is just something you can't do because that's failure. His own internal mind says, you have to stay for your CV. It's got to look good. I've got to be here and I've got to succeed. I've got to achieve it because the expectation is that I must be able to achieve it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have these targets. So, this is a real worry. His cortisol level is at a really high level. I talked about chronic stress. It's now affecting his sleep. He doesn't sleep. That then affects his whole body rhythms. He's not eating well. His energy levels are low. The targets and the expectations and the work haven't changed. And yet his response to them have now, because he's got less energy and in his own mind, he's less effective. So his frontal cortex and his adrenaline is up often at the time, one-to-ones and, feedback. And he doesn't really know what to do, to be honest. And he's got no one to talk to because he doesn't want to voice that he's not coping with it. And this is the vicious circle when you don't cope with something like this. So with Ralph, even though, the carrots and the approach of seemingly intended, incentives and gratitude and appreciation and goals, and you get all these rewards and it's exciting, we're paying you well, you're achieving all these things, that is great, and it really is great, but not if it is to the detriment of your health or your capacity and ability to sustain that level of work or that level of pressure. So that's one to think about. And I don't know if you've been experiences like that or you manage people like that yourselves, but I'd just like you to be aware of that from an employee point of view. Rose. Now, Rose is a young lady who has not recently left university. She's excited to enter the world of work. It's classed as an early career in the talent and recruitment spaces. She's really looking forward to doing a great job and seeing where her career takes her. Unfortunately, her boss is a little bit old school. He's a bit of one of those guys that perhaps thinks that if he doesn't sort of make his stamp on Rose and make her realise who the boss is and what he says goes, and sometimes that's by making her feel a bit on edge, picking her up on things and making sure she knows that he is in charge. And he just naturally has that approach. I don't think, we don't believe at all he intends to make her feel bad. We just know that he wants to make her know that he's the boss. She's in a presentation. She's doing a presentation she's been asked to do. She's not been in the role long at all. And just as she's starting, her boss is straight on the typos that are in the presentation, highlighting them, telling her it's not good enough. It really isn't good enough. You should have prepared better for this. And I expected more of you. That type of language, And the team around her and him they're not saying anything. They're not putting her at ease. They're not counteracting what he said because that's the culture of the organisation. They couldn't possibly go head to head with the boss and tell him that he's being a bit unfair and a bit mean, not publicly, because it would just turn around on them. So poor old Rose is starting to feel a bit flustered, and her cortisol levels are starting to rise. The adrenaline kicked in when he immediately sort of picked her up on something, and it stopped her in her tracks. Now that immediately affects performance. Rose is not a little bit different to my experience with technology at the beginning of this, but it's a similar thing. She's now not focused on delivering the best of the presentation she possibly could. However, it didn't need to be like that, and it wasn't getting the best out of who she is and how she is. So that, really is the analogy of the big stick. It's if I treat them a bit mean, they'll stay keen and motivated, and they won't take the mickey, and they'll know who the boss is. So I haven't got to worry about that, and I won't be getting challenged by anybody or told, how to do things or to do things a different way. Now, Richard is a bit of a superstar, really. Richard is a intelligent, decent human being that wants to work hard, is motivated. He's joined this company. He's been there a while now, and he's absolutely loving it. He talks highly about it to all the people that he works for. He's even recommended a couple of people into the business that he knows, and because he knows people that are a bit similar to him, the businesses are benefited. They've got some intros from brilliant candidates that, generally speaking, are all going to get along with Richard anyway if they work with him, but they also have a similar kind of caliber and attitude, which is brilliant. So why is that different? Richard's manager and the department and the company, quite frankly, have got a totally different attitude to culture and how to interact with employees and how to build a high-performing company. And that's to engage with the individuals, to get their feedback on a regular basis, not be frightened of what they say, not be worried that they're going to open a can of worms, or they're going to open Pandora's box with all the other sayings that I've heard in my 10 years or more of doing this. You've got to ask the questions, because people are still going to have those views, even if they don't voice them, and they act on those views and those feelings at some point. So with Richard, it doesn't, he's running a workshop in this particular scenario, and everyone's up for whatever he's going to do, because they know he's going to do a great job, and the bits that they're going to have as feedback are going to be constructive. They're going to be about his success. They're not going to be about being critical for the sake of it. It's positive criticism, and actually it's all about how can we make it better, because everybody's aligned with what you're trying to achieve as a business, which is to either improve client service or gain more customers, or help more people with health issues, or whatever it might be that is the purpose of your business. So as a culture, Richard is calm. His high performance is going to be its maximum. His self-actualization, which is all about meeting your potential as an individual, is most likely to be happening in this environment, because the people he works with have also got the same environment. So they're all lifting each other up. So that you can see the carrot and the stick are in the bin, and it's not to say that consequences or accountability aren't important. That's the real version of the modern version of a stick. Yes, people have to be accountable for their job. They do have to do a job. They do have to show up. They need to be responsible for it, and they need to do it well. And there are consequences, clearly, if they don't. Hopefully, there'll be support to actually get them where they need to be, and identifying perhaps something that wasn't the right hire, or we mishired, we didn't really give them the right skill, they didn't have the right skill, we didn't realise what the job involved. Those are all realities that happen every day. The carrot, absolutely, incentives, rewards, recognition, appropriate and frequent and assigned to the level of the work that's involved and the value that it can be afforded by the business. Appreciation should happen every day in my book. As well as laughter, quite frankly. A day without laughter is a day wasted in my world. But you can see we're not really saying that the stick and the carrot are terrible. What we're saying is the way they were deployed years ago doesn't work anymore. People don't want that. People want to be able to give their ideas. They want to be able to apply themselves, and they want to be able to collaborate and understand the purpose of the business and where it's going. So the only way you can do that is to have an involved business where you collaborate. So strategies for high performance, again, I refer to the playbook. There's a lot of detail in the playbook itself. But I think from a point of view, the strategies that we would generally look at catering for would be the clarity of mission. So mission, vision, values. A good, strong management team will be very clear about the business that you're in and that you're providing and what you're doing. And really, if they understand how important that is in articulating that to employees as part of your onboarding, as part of your regularly checking in, the clarity of language, checking against it. Are we hitting our mission? Is this what we are doing? Is taking this client on going to help us realise what we're here to do? Those sorts of leadership skills are really important to getting people all pulling in the same direction. So in connection really is about oxytocin. That's the love trust hormone. And that creates bonding. You've got a sense of inclusivity, diversity, a sense of belonging, equity, equality. All of those things help build connection with different people across the business and with the business itself. So you have an affinity with the company that you're working for and what you're trying to achieve, and hopefully proud to work for that company. I've certainly been proud to work for some of the companies I've had. And in fact, I actually defined myself as working for that company rather than being the professional that I was, because my profession was actually attached to the company I worked for, because they made me feel that I was a professional, because they were that good at the way they worked and the culture they built. Safety is really about psychological safety, so that mentally and emotionally you feel that you can trust the organisation, that they're honest with you, that they're authentic, that they've got your back, that they're looking after your well-being, that the work they expect you to do is appropriate to what they're paying you and the stress levels that are required, and that they're not looking to, just churn through employees, that they actually care about you and they're going to invest in your development, and they want you to perform in the job and enjoy it and have fun and be innovative and be creative. And that leads obviously on to growth. Growth is a massive thing that a lot of feedback surveys now are really talking about. People want to be invested in, they want to learn, they want to grow, and they want to develop. And that includes soft skills. COVID affected a lot of people with not being able to interact with people in a normal way. Digitalization has changed the way people interact too. Social skills aren't as strong as they have been at different times, particularly with younger audiences. I know there's some great communicators out there with younger audiences too, but their world is different. They don't rely on one-to-one conversation as such. It's text, and it's a different way of communicating. And I think I did a webinar years ago that had 5 generations talked about. I mean, I don't know if you can have more than 5 generations, but it probably will be. But we all interact differently, and we all communicate differently. So growing obviously happens in different ways for lots of people, and growth isn't always about promotion. There's a myth really that a lot of leaders or managers think that when somebody says, "Oh, I want to, develop myself, or I want to do this, or I want to do that," depending on your life stage and depending on how motivated and ambitious you are, some people just want to learn more and do something different, and they want to stay in the same business but go and do a different role and grow that way. Some people don't want to lead and manage people. They don't want the stress. They just want to do what they do well. And that's really what, I realized with one-to-ones when I used to do them, is understanding what motivates people. But growth itself is a massive attractor and something to want people to stay with you as a business when you're helping them grow. Meaning is really about purpose, something of significance. I've just read the book of Seth's, which is about the Song of Significance. And it really is about a modern approach to the workplace. And have we got work of meaning that is meaningful to us? Do we feel we're making a difference? And every organisation can make a difference. It's how they choose to do it and how they choose to feel about it. The recognition piece, as I've said, I'm a big believer on recognition and appreciation, but that can be literally from how are you? How actually are you? And I really appreciate what you did. It doesn't always have to be about money and rewards and experiences and things that cost money, particularly if a business is going through a tough time. But actually gratitude is one massively important for our mental health, ourselves. Those positive affirmations of, we're our own worst self-inner critic. And if that's what we do to ourselves, you can bet all your employees are doing that too. So to lift them up and to thank them, when you think, oh, they must know, but they must know, I say it a lot, they must know they've done a good job, because we say, oh, great, thanks, well done, and we've moved on. Do you know what? Look somebody in the eye and actually say to them pointedly, what you did, X, Y, and Z then, this is what it meant to me. And I tell you, it will be a totally different experience than what you will normally get with the flippant, how are you, when nobody listens to the answer, or the how are you today, or how are you feeling, but not actually listening. And we've done loads of stuff on active listening and all those sort of things, but it's really important if you want to build connection and bonding and release those good feel, hormones. And as I say, they're in the playbook, and my mind's gone blank because I'm trying to think of some of them. But we call it the daily dose, which is the dopamine, the oxytocin, the serotonin, and the endorphins. Exercise is a great one for endorphins, but serotonin and dopamine is, when you feel good. You've been made to feel good. Next time you feel good, think about what's happened in your life, those combination of things that make you feel good. Start to understand it, and conversely, think about the things that have made you feel bad or stressed or anxious. What is it that's making you feel that way? And then apply it to your workplace and the people you manage. So what happened to Ralph, Rose and Richard? Well, the good news is Ralph is still here. He's doing a brilliant job. He left the organisation. A great HR manager stepped in, somebody that was in tune with mental health and looking after, the teams with the APs and things like that, and actually just making sure that staff were happy and well. And she'd noticed Ralph's taking a few odd sick days and things like that, and just not being himself. So that ended up in a tribunal in this particular example, which is obviously costly and stressful for everybody involved in it, including Ralph and including the business. The managers that were involved in Ralph's kind of bullying, effectively, eventually were left the business. They were asked to leave, I suppose is the right phrase, in one way or another. So, that's a lesson to learn there, really. But it didn't need to be like that for anybody. With the right interventions and the right support, Ralph was coached out of the business in a nice way. So he said he wanted to leave, and they wanted to do it in a responsible way. So he had support to find a nice next role, and also with the support to understand that, these are unintended management styles sometimes, and it's not personal, even if it feels like it. With Rose, she soon left that business actually because life's too short to be around managers and businesses. And that certainly is what people choose to do now. They may not always move up, but they'll happily move sideways, or they'll just go somewhere new. Why wouldn't you if the culture doesn't fit you? So Rose is happy. She went on to do great things and just, developed her career. And Richard, the hypo, high performance and high potential, he did a great job. He just, he went up through the ranks. He had a brilliant time, learned lots of things, grew, developed. His manager, Simon, was continued to be his mentor, and he moved into other big businesses and led international workforces. So he took forward the high-performing attitude and the culture and the positive environments that he'd been in. And he's a very emotionally intelligent guy that understood how to manage his own feelings and thoughts and think at his peak, at his best. He was high-performing in every way to make good, solid decisions because he wasn't worrying about stress and cortisol or adrenaline, or just worrying about how he's going to get through each day. He was in the best environment he could be in. What's not to like? So rewards and recognition. So we're going to go back to full screen now, and I'm going to come back and you'll see that I've been here all the time. So feeling a little bit better than I did at the beginning, I have to say. I know I've waffled a bit, I can't help it, but I hope you did enjoy some of what I've spoken about. And as I say, the playbook has some really great stuff in there, so I hope you do want to take that on. Effectively, what we're going to do is allow everyone to have a playbook if they want one. So you can either email me directly or go onto the website. The email address is sharonkennedy@engageandprosper.com, or you can even visit my profile on LinkedIn and message me there, and I'll happily send you a link for it. And I also, we do offer coaching. We offer all kinds of reviews and courtesy free consultations to a point, clearly. And if anybody is looking for help or wants support or anything like that, please reach out. We'll happily provide information and some options for you. And anyone that does take a coaching call or any sort of consultation with us, then we'll happily provide a copy of the Seth Godin book, The Song of Significance, because I think it's a great modern tool for modern thinking businesses, and it's not a heavy read either. I did it in like an evening, so but it's one definitely worth having. And if you do catch my comment on bees on a video, I do disagree with Seth about the bees and the hive and it being a byproduct. They need the honey. They have to have the honey for the winter. But I'll talk to Seth about that another time. So thank you very much for listening. I really do appreciate whoever's still there, however many of you are. I'm really grateful. And I think time for Q&A for anyone that's got any. And if you haven't, or you have some another time, again, please just email me. So I think on the questions that I can see, somebody's asked me about the email address, so I'll just say it again. So it's Sharon Kennedy, 1R, Kennedy, double N, @engage and prosper, and it's AND, prosper.com. You can't have ampersands in email addresses or websites, but I didn't really think about that at the time. Another question is about the resilience of a company. Is employee engagement what brands like Apple used to become resilient and achieve high performance? Absolutely. Apple, clearly they're a fantastic organization in terms of knowing what their customers want, and they've turned that inside to their employees as well. They can't create and deliver the products and the service that they do without being able to take on board what their staff need and how to develop them and how to work together to build a brilliant business. So yeah, absolutely. What would it cost to hire you guys? Well, I think really it does depend. I don't like talking numbers. It makes me feel a bit embarrassed, to be honest. I think all I'd answer on that one, I think it really depends on what you're needing. But typical programs might start from 5,000 upwards, depending on what you need to achieve and the size of your business. So how can you convince the administration to build a highly productive environment? Is there any indicator for non-productive organisations? I'm not sure if I totally understand that question. Convincing leadership, I think there are lots of evidence-based studies that prove how employee engagement increases the bottom line commercially, not least because there are less people that are off sick, so absenteeism goes down, attendance goes up, and presenteeism goes up. So when people are there, they're more productive, and also attrition goes down. So that's people leaving. Okay, now when people leave a business, I can't deny that I know companies that have been clapping their hands when certain people have handed their notice in because they were toxic, or they weren't productive, or they just weren't there on the journey with everyone else in the same way, despite the best support. But there are obviously people that you don't want to go. And those talented people, particularly in smaller businesses, leave a really big hole. Not least is the cost to replace the individual, to hire the new person, that the risk of that new hire, and the time it's going to take to train and onboard that individual before they're really up to speed and delivering value to the business. So all those things are, evidence really alone of what the commercial sense makes sense to do so, let alone the environment. So I don't know if I've answered your question properly, but I would be happy to talk to you further if you wanted some pointers to be able to evidence internally what needs to be looked at and the sort of benefits you could start to enjoy and some opportunities and options how to do that. Somebody's appreciated my honesty in your presentation style. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. I'm having a debrief after this, and I'm not particularly confident it's going to be as positive as I would have liked, but it's still a debrief. And you know what? I'm managing myself, so I'm going to be kind to myself as well as a bit critical to push forward the benefits and the progress and the high performance. Another thank you. So thank you very much. What steps can we take to ensure that an employee is happy? Sorry, email's stopping me reading that one. There's a playbook request just come in. I'm very happy about that. Thank you, a lady called Amy. On employees happy with their culture. So what steps can we take to ensure that an employee is happy with their culture? I have a team member now who's resigned out of the blue, but has never previously raised concerns in one-to-ones. Well, that's interesting, really. Resigned out of the blue, that's a quite an interesting phrase in its own right. How does somebody kind of say they're not happy and still be expected to be considered for promotion, or not, that individual not taking that as a rejection, that you're kind of going to leave, but you might not leave, because you're then opening yourself up to, well, I'm kind of interested in another job. It's a bit like, a terrible analogy really, but it's a bit like being in a relationship and considering that perhaps I might be looking for something else, but I'm not going to tell you I'm looking for something else because I might change my mind, but you might be a bit miffed with me, so I'm not going to do it. And it's the same scenario in a company, really. You're not really going to reveal that you're so unhappy that you're actively looking. People do that, and I think that's when they have done that, is because they're very comfortable in their role, they're very confident about the way the business has gone and changes that have happened, and they are looking for a solution. So the people that generally do say, I'm not happy and these are the reasons why, are in a quite a different situation to perhaps some more junior members of staff, or people that just aren't so open. And again, maybe look at the one-to-ones. Maybe the one-to-ones are too formal, too structured. I've done one-to-ones that are chats. You learn a lot more through chats. I've done interviews that are chats. People learn a lot more about me that chats than a very formal process. So you've got to look at, is your process not aiding your purpose, or is your purpose aiding your process? And, ask them. My personal view on exit surveys, notice, can you come and have a chat immediately? Not weeks down the line when they've run around pulling their hair out to do a handover of some kind, if they're working notice. And then by then you're asking for an exit survey. And at that point, they're normally kind of, oh, yeah, no, it was okay. No, nothing really. It was, I just want something different, trying something new. Because guess what? Psychologically, I'm going to something new. It might not work out. Might need a reference, might need to come back. Now I'm closer to where I'm going to be. I'm not totally confident it's the right move, but I'm doing it anyway. So again, think about the motivations as why somebody's leaving, and when you're most likely to get useful information that's going to help you improve the culture and take that exit information back into the front of the talent recruitment and attraction piece. I look at it as three cogs, really. You've got the onboarding, new people coming into your business, which is generally a smaller cog of people in terms of mass. You've got the big cog of your normal employees every day that you're motivating, learning from, working with, growing the business. And then you've got hopefully a tiny cog of people leaving. And they're leaving and only leaving because it's just not the right fit and it's just time to go. And sometimes you can't stop people leaving. You've got to let them move on if they need to improve their income, or their life stage is different and there's just not the capacity in the business. So sometimes they just go. But I'd ask you to think, was it really out of the blue? Or did you miss the signs? Or the process is not allowing you to see that it was on the cards. You just didn't spot it. And that's not putting blame at your door, by the way. I'm just saying, just understand if it was really out of the blue. So we've got, what strategies would you suggest to reduce cortisol, i.e. stress? Well, first off, remember cortisol, we need it. We actually need it to be motivated to get up and do the things that we need to do. So you definitely need the right level of cortisol because it's important. But if you are in a chronic stress situation or your stress levels are too high, there are lots of approaches. We do offer services on that, but I'm conscious I don't want to sell to people because it's about engaging with you. But we do offer neuroscience-based solutions, coaching and apps, which are fantastic. I've done them myself. That's why I'm able to coach them, and I think they're brilliant. So really basic body rhythms, brain-body balances, looking at your whole system as a life, really. So your work is a part of that, your nutrition, your health, your sleeping, your rhythms, your connections, your social group, your support system, your exercise. How often do you meditate? Do you know the difference between that and quietening the mind? There are a lot more things that people kind of know about, but they haven't got a framework to kind of work through them on a regular basis that really improves it. But I actually think one of the best things you can do is stop, is actually stop sometimes and say, you know, if I was forced to stop, and I hear this a lot by people, either COVID naturally stopped their business or stopped this. And sometimes there's always opportunity out of anything, even when it doesn't feel like there might be immediately. But that stop sometimes can be the total reset. You know, you have choices. You do not have to do the job, or you do not have to do it the way you're doing it. And if you need to speak to your manager, you do. And that's proactive for the business and yourself. So actually, I think any HR person or boss or leader should be listening to somebody if they're saying, actually, I'm really, really stressed and I'm not coping, because actually you're looking out for their best interests as well as your own, if the idea is to improve the environment and the culture that you're in. So that's the stress reduction, really. Can you describe the basic traits in a leader that you could meet this high performance with their team? I personally think emotional intelligence, positivity is a massive. There's a thing called co-regulation and mirror neurons. So mirror neurons really are, if you see people behaving in a certain way, somebody's going to, that's my light gone off, sorry, I have to throw myself across the room to get it to go back on, and it won't, so I'm sorry. But we're climate friendly, we're looking out for our carbon neutral credits, so you'll have to just see me in the dark, I'm afraid. But yeah, so that positivity, optimism, recognizing that people want fun in their work. There are lots of different traits, and there's no one way to do it. You know, we're not telling, you know, or saying or suggesting that people have to be a certain personality, right? There's room for everybody and every type of person, but it's about actually being motivated enough to care for the bigger purpose that benefits everybody. And then ultimately that's going to be good for everyone. So I don't know, I'll kind of look for that. I mean, I did see a perfect employee once, which I thought was brilliant, and I did nearly put it in the slide, but it was a little bit outdated. So I think I might need to do another one for that. So we maybe look for the perfect trait. And if anyone's got one, please send it to me. I'd love it. So what steps can we take to ensure the employees happy with the culture? Oh no, so that was the one, we've had that one before, sorry. Can you, that's it. Thank you for the presentation. Would you be able to elaborate on strategies on creating a sense of trust and safety with the team and colleague? Well, okay, so I would reply back on that and think about what makes you feel like you can trust an individual or a business. And I would say that generally speaking, you are not the last to know about things, which is, again, something I used to hear of over the years. You know, employees would say, well, we're the last to know. They'd hear about news, whether it was positive or negative, in the press or by clients and customers before they knew from their own companies, which is not great, is it? You know, to not know that, and that doesn't really develop trust at all. I think having a feedback mechanism and actually acting on that, you know, I always say to people, if you're going to do a survey, you must act on the results. Even if you're not going to do the changes that are being asked for, or you can't, you can still explain why. You can still validate and recognize that people are saying and contributing, and it's helpful to you as somebody that's running the business or a department. But you mustn't not do anything. I mean, because that's really actually worse. I really believe that's worse than not doing a survey. You're better off being, at least you can say you didn't know. Whereas if you actually know and did nothing about it, that's worse. So you know, I can't give you all of the traits or all of the ways to build trust, but I would say being as honest as you can, almost acting, and I'm cringing to say it, but as a leader, you are almost acting from if you use the analogy of a business being almost like a family. And I know lots of people do talk about their businesses being family, you know, it's a bit, you know, we're like a family here. And that's because they're actually getting on really well. It's not actually because, you know, they all feel they're related. It's because they're all aligned and they're all feeling that they're pulling in the same direction. They've all got the same vested interests and loyalty to each other. So that's really the traits of that. And I just think to be able to build that trust, it's about continuity. It's about being consistent. It's about not overreacting with your behavior or your responses to situations. And that's about that high performance, returning to what they class as homeostasis, which is that point of calm, bouncing forward. You come back to a point of resilience. And resilience is about, you know, you can't stop external events stressing you out. or causing you anxiety, like the beginning of this. You know, the team behind this, by the way, have done a great job, and I'd like to thank them again. I thanked them at the beginning, and I did say to them at the beginning of this whole event, it's not really a great way to start. We couldn't do this for some reason. We had a technical problem there. It wasn't their fault, but it still wasn't ideal. And I was much more stressed at the beginning. But, you know, I'd like to think I'm a resilient person. And now I don't feel stressed at all. I feel actually quite excited that it's nearly over. But that's not because I'm not enjoying talking to you. I can't see any of you. So it's not the same thing as properly socializing and having a glass of wine afterwards or whatever it might be. But so that's my point about being safe, to be honest, be open, actually communicate, talk about things, ask people what they want to know, you know, and just be human about it, really. Don't second guess everything, you know, literally just talk. So, and I think that's the last question. So I think if there's any more, I don't believe there is. We're under time, which is good for me. If you knew me, you'd be impressed. Please do email me. The playbook is just being finalised with a few bits of typos. I didn't want that manager picking me up on it, but it looks good. There's a lot more information on there, and I'd love you to have it and share it with your network and whoever. You know, send it around the world, all around the world, several times if you like. I'd be very grateful. And I've enjoyed talking to you, and I am glad it's over. But I hope I see you again sometime. And please do get in touch if you want any coaching or any support or just any advice on what to do in your business. So enjoy the week and the weekend, which is around the corner. Thank you very much.